This is the Book Deal podcast,
where you will discover the inspiring stories behind your favourite books.
We interview seasoned and debut authors, as well as publishing industry professionals, to bring you the best tips and advice on how to get that elusive book deal.
So no matter what stage of writing you're at, we've got you covered. I'm Tina Strachan.
I'm Madeline Cleary.
And I'm Natasha Rye.
And join us as we pull back the curtain of published authors,
one deal at a time. The Book Deal podcast acknowledges the traditional owners of the land and waters which it's recorded on, and pays respect to their elders past, present, and emerging.
Welcome to episode 91 of the Book Deal podcast. I'm Tina Strachan, and today I'm chatting to Sarah Clutton, author of recently released The Bookshop of Buried Pasts and last year's bestseller, The Remarkable Truths of Alfie Baines. Sarah writes books filled with mystery, intrigue, and humour, and I had the best chat with Sarah recently where she shared her travel adventures for book research, her writing process, which includes a close relationship with her sister, ideas that sprout for single scenes or characters, and the usual process of self-doubt and how we just have to trust in this process. We also chat about witchy influences and death doulas. It's an incredibly interesting chat, and I hope you enjoy it. Sarah Clutton, welcome to the Book Deal podcast.
Thank you for having me, Tina.
Oh, it's so exciting to see you. We're Debut Crew 25 buddies, aren't we?
I know, exactly. We've been hanging out on Zoom for a while now.
It's been fun. We always talk about writing community, but yeah, Debut Crews are that extra bit of fun because everybody's sort of on the ride together, aren't they? And so excited to see what everyone else is doing.
Exactly. Yeah, we're all sort of clumping through the darkness together, working out where the light is.
That's exactly right. But it's been so supportive. But, you know, Debut Crew, so that means your first book actually came out last year, The Truths of Alfie Baines.
Yes.
And but we're here today to talk about your brand new book, The Bookshop of Buried Pasts. Now, tell us all about it.
It is slightly different to The Remarkable Truths of Alfie Baines in as much as it's not set in Tasmania for a start. It's set between the Southern Highlands of New South Wales and Cambridgeshire in England. And it tells the story of Phyllida Banks, who's an antiquarian book dealer who has some quite deep, dark secrets in her past. And so one day she's suddenly missing from her granddaughter Lottie's life, leaving her not only to run their antiquarian bookshop, but she leaves her a request to find somebody called Francis. And poor Lottie has no idea who Francis is, but she sort of sets out on this quest to work out what on earth her grandmother is doing and what she's done. And she soon does some digging, and it lands her in Cambridgeshire, and she finds there another bookshop with sort of eerie similarities to their own bookshop, and down the road a man by the name of Francis Fitzhenry, who has quite a dark past as well. And she sort of realizes, I guess, at that moment that her grandmother is at the heart of an unsolved crime, a mystery that sort of baffled police for 50 years. And so this is the journey towards finding out who her grandmother really is. But it's also a family journey about sort of mothering and secrets and grandmotherhood and spirituality. And there's a bit about witches. There's a tiny little subplot about sort of Celtic mythology. It's got all the things, Tina. You know, if you want a book about a murder mystery with all the things, this is the one.
Yeah, well, who doesn't want a book with all the things, a murder mystery with all the things? That sounds really exciting. And it does, it ticks lots of boxes, doesn't it? And it sounds like it's got a little bit of everything there, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
I do want to ask, though, so it is set in a small town, so not unlike your own, isn't it?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so it's very much based on the small town I live in the Southern Highlands. I made up a village in this book called Brookbank, but Brookbank is very much based around the tiny village that I live in, and there are lots of little villages scattered around the Southern Highlands. So I've taken a little bit of all of them probably and just rammed them into this fictional village. But I live in Berrima actually, which is home to the famous Berkelo book barn. a beautiful antiquarian bookshop. Well, it's a sort of secondhand book barn, and then down the back of the property, if you make an appointment, you can go into their antiquarian book barn.
Wow.
And it's quite spectacular, and it also hosts weddings, and it has beautiful restaurants. It's got all of these gorgeous spaces. So I actually had my first Highlands book launch there, which was lovely. And yeah, so I have got lots of good inspiration for the setting of this book in locally, and then we sort of head across the seas to when I did lots of research trips about beautiful English gardens and heritage houses and that kind of thing over in England. So I was lucky to kind of weave that into.
Yes. Well, I definitely have some more questions about that, actually, traveling for research. But so if you're a local then and you're reading this book, will you see will there be lots of familiar places and faces?
Yes, there will be. I mean, I sort of mentioned some of the colonial era buildings, the heritage architecture. The beautiful sandstone buildings built by these poor convicts who were sort of enslaved and made to work and drag all this beautiful sandstone and pick it out of the earth with their picks. And you can still see all these gorgeous chisel marks in the sandstone and think about those poor people. But they did leave us this stunning architecture. And in fact, Berrima is known as the most intact Georgian village on mainland Australia. There's another one very similar in near Hobart. But this is in Australia. It's got the longest continuously licensed pub in Australia.
Oh,
so
okay.
Fame in Berrima, not just books.
No, there's so many books and pubs. Like it just doesn't.
Wineries. There's like all the things. Yeah,
all the things. Okay, I am certainly going to have to visit.
And actually, the Southern Highlands, Berrima village and Bowral and around there, it's known as a book town. So it's Australia's first book town, actually. So if you know about book towns all over the world, there are these towns that are called book towns, and they are known to be hotspots for literary types and bookshops. And so, yes, we are a book town, even though we're a region. It's very strange, but yes.
Well, it sounds like a lovely place to visit if you are doing your international book town tour, which sounds like an incredible tour. So I did want to ask you though, like, as the plot sounds amazing, and you're weaving in all these different elements, which is fantastic. So just the blurb on the back of the book alone is a selling point. But I really wanted to talk about the cover art and design, because it's like, I know for me, and everybody's got different, things that they enjoy and different choices with their book cover design. But this really stood out for me and was something that would really attract me if I store it on the shelf. It's so beautiful. Did you have any, can you describe it firstly, actually, for people that haven't seen it yet?
That's right. So it is a close-up of a bookshop in a dark blue and old, beautiful, colourful old books, and then there's the silhouette of a woman, a 1960s hairdo, sort of floating through the background, and there's lovely flowers all around it. And so it's a stunning cover, and I was lucky that both the cover designer and the artist who was employed to do the artwork were so clever and gave us this incredible cover, because it actually, I think, has really been quite show-stopping, in terms of, it's had lots of, art. The artwork's been used on the cover of various magazines and things in the book world, and that's it's really lovely when artists are recognized for their work, because that does help sell a book. I think obviously they say you can't judge a book by its cover, but I think you can judge a book.
And I think people absolutely do.
Actually, I think it's fantastic. So, but it's generated a lot of interest, which is very lucky for me.
And did you have any input into that, or did you just leave it all up to?
There was a couple of little tweaks, with some colours and things that I sort of suggested, but ultimately I could see how well they'd done, and I just sort of was so thrilled.
Yeah, they know what they're doing.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah. I find it really interesting because, as you know, I'm published with HarperCollins, and every year they have an author day, and so you can go down or you can join online, and they ask various people in departments from the company to talk, and they usually always have the artists and the designers, and they walk you through how they come up with these ideas and where they pull it from and put it all
Yes.
together. And geez,
Yeah.
it's incredible what they do. And then, the finished product, how
Yeah.
they have a rough and then a finished product, and it just
Mm.
looks incredible. And it really
Yes.
does sell a book. If you see the Bookshop of Buried Past on a shelf, it certainly would draw your attention. It's
It's
kind of,
intriguing, isn't it?
yeah, it
It
is.
does reflect the sense of intrigue that I was trying
Hmm.
to have with this book, because this is a book about intriguing old bookshops and cozy, comforting corners.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, they
um,
captured that, definitely.
they really captured that,
Mm.
didn't they? So, yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
And, secrets, buried secrets. That's what it's about.
Yeah, it's a little bit dark, but it's also got some beautiful color there. I did want to ask you though, there's a couple of little books in the window,
Yeah.
and they look, do they have any significance there? They're sort of face out. They kind of look like they're meant to be other books to you that are
Look,
already published. Have
I'm
you?
not exactly sure. I sort of know what you mean, but it's
Yeah.
I don't exactly think. Look, I don't know. I don't know.
Mm.
That's a
We'll
good
have to ask the
question.
designers. They might
Yeah,
have
you do need
put
to
their
ask them.
own little
I just sort
private
of
ones
thought,
in there.
it's very clever.
Hmm.
And they did actually take, when I described the bookshop in the book, it is that dark, dusty blue. And so they've really captured exactly what I said in the book too,
Yeah.
which is
And titles as well. Was this your title from the beginning?
my title, which
Oh,
is
wow.
interesting. Yeah.
Mm.
So actually, the book started out when I pitched it as the final request of Phyllida Banks. And
Hmm.
Phyllida Banks is our protagonist. She's
Hmm.
80 and she's kind of come to that point in her life where she needs to, well, A, she's faced with something of a crisis, but then B, she sort of wants to look back and work out what is a good life. And this is her ponderings throughout the book. We still hear her pondering what is a good life and what is a good death. And so actually, Phyllida Banks was the beginning of this story. I had a scene in my head in about 2017 when I was writing, actually before because we're in the debut crew together, because these are my first two traditionally published books, but I had two books out earlier in 2019 and 2020 with Bookshop, who are Hachette UK's digital first publisher. And so I have had two books out before. And when I was in the middle of writing one of those and really hating it, as I tend to do, and I'm sure lots of other writers tend to do when they're about sort of 40% into a book, that they really think,
Yes.
oh, I'm such a terrible writer. I've got nothing here. There's no story. This
Yeah.
is stupid. What am I doing? I
Hmm.
need to throw it away. That
Hmm.
point that, I've definitely hit every time I've tried to write a novel. I had this scene come to me really strongly of this sort of elderly woman looking out the window one night and thinking about the ending her own life. But she had this sort of glint in her eye of sort of mischief, and she was thinking of the things she was leaving behind and what she was leaving for her loved ones, because she knew it was going to be a big surprise. I just had that scene very vividly in my head, and I thought, no, that's the book I want to write. And I said to my sister, who helps me write my books because she's got lots of great ideas, oh, this book is really stupid that we're writing, because they say she helps me write because she just gives me lots of ideas. I'm going to write this book instead. And she's, of course, as any sensible human would say, is don't be ridiculous. This is a great book. Keep going. You just have to, because I'm not a finisher, but somehow I managed to finish. And so Phyllida Banks was put on the back burner. She didn't have the name at that point, but she was really inspired by my grandmother, who was kind of wickedly gleeful, joyous, intelligent, beautiful, warm human who just picked up people everywhere she went. She had friends. She'd go on a train journey for 2 hours, and at the end she'd be writing down people's telephone numbers, and they'd be friends for life. And so she was this sort of curious, interested person, and I wanted to explore what a good death was as well. And so when I had this idea for the final request of Phyllida Banks, I pitched it, and then I thought, this is going to be about death, this book, even though I write uplit, which is uplifting. literature. It's meant to be funny and humorous and warm and feel good, but with some dark themes in the middle. I thought, I want to explore death. How am I going to do that in Uplit? That's going to be fun. So I wrote an article about this recently. I sort of was interested in the idea of death doulas and death walkers. I don't know if you know what they are, but a doula in birth is someone who helps you through birth, and a doula in death is the same. It's someone who helps you through the process of dying and death. So it might be somebody, you might know you're dying, and, the logistical and physical and personal and familial aspects of dying can all be very difficult. And so having someone there with you or with your family to help with whatever aspect of those things you want, whether it's your funeral, whether it's sitting by your bed and making sure you're comfortable, whether it's doing your paperwork, the admin, helping you to tell your children that you're dying, whatever it might be, the death doulas or death walkers can help you with this, and they're trained in how to help somebody have a death that they want to have that will feel right and with dignity and all of those things. So I was interested in that, and I woke up on my birthday about 3 years ago, and sort of my husband had organised a party at our local pub for me, and then my death walker hashtag came up, and I could see that that this incredible death walker, who's very well known, and she has a centre in Mullumbimby called the Natural Death Care Centre. She came up on my hashtag, and she was doing one final course in Australia that year. It was May, one final course that year, and it was in Melbourne, and it was the following day. And I thought, and it started at 9 a.m. the following day. And so I thought, I need to get to Melbourne for that. And I live in the countryside, quite far away from the airport. So I thought, I need to go today so that I can get there for 9 a.m. start tomorrow. So I cancelled my birthday party while my husband was still sleeping, and I booked a flight and came to Melbourne and did a death doula course for one day. It was really interesting. Anyway, that's a long story. And to suffice to say, none of it made it into the book. But Phyllida Banks's journey towards what is a good death and what is a good life and what is my sort of spiritual reckoning with all of these ideas is definitely through the book. And so once I made her into a book dealer, there was a much more intriguing title I could give it, because who doesn't want to hang out in an antiquarian bookshop, frankly, with a woman like Phyllida Banks? And so I pitched that title to my publisher when I was halfway through the book, and she absolutely loved it. So that was lucky. It was a long answer, wasn't it?
But it's an incredible story. I wasn't sure at the beginning if death doulas were actually real people and real things that people do, but that sounds incredible. And what a hard job, but fulfilling, and what an incredible type of person to do that work. How did you find the course? It didn't make you want to become a death doula after that, or?
Well, I've trained in a one-day course, which makes you absolutely for nothing, probably. But what it did do was, all it did was sort of to tell you how a death doula could be trained and what's involved. So, I did my death plan, and and when we were there, there's all these beautiful people.
Yeah.
People who are interested in a sort of a beautiful death are really nice people. Like when you go to a course like this, you're only going to meet nice people. It's like the writing community, right? They're all nice. And so we were all sitting around, about 25 of us in this room. And we did things like, she's like, sort of 3/4 of the way through the day, she's like, oh, now, we were talking about disposal methods, right? So you can, all of the things, coffins and this and that, and natural disposal. And then we talked about shrouds and what is the purpose of a shroud and why would you do that? And then we were like given the opportunity to be wrapped in a shroud, and how to wrap someone in a shroud after how to wrap your person. And so 8 people would wrap the person on the floor, and we all took turns, and we were all like definitely keen to be wrapped in the shroud. And they teach you how to, or maybe it was 6 people, and 6 or 8 people, 3 or 4 on each side of this shroud, and so, which is just a piece of fabric, whatever beautiful piece of fabric you want to use. and you would lie, the person would lie on it, and you would obviously, there would be no movement. You would be pretending that you were the person who was dead, and they would wrap you ever so gently. Then they would pick you up and in a second piece of fabric rock you in the air in this dark room while you were wrapped in a shroud. It was the most incredible moment. It was just to feel the care of these human beings who are so invested in honoring a person, right? And learning how to honor somebody, their person. It was so sort of moving as a participant. Anyway, there was one of my experiences in the class.
That's beautiful. It's quite spiritual and kind of, yeah, it's sort of as serious as death can be. It's so lovely to think that if you're planning it, because it's the person who's faced with death that's actually organizing all of this, right, and putting this all in place. So it must feel really empowering to sort of have
And I
control
think
of that.
there were lots of people there for different reasons. I think some people wanted to do the long training course as a death doula. Other people may have had someone in their life who was facing death. Other people just wanted to get ready because they had aging parents or other people in their lives who would be coming to this moment that we are all going to come to, and they were just interested. So it was super interesting. But
Yeah,
anyway, I mean,
great
the book is
experience.
actually not about death. It's
No, that's right, but that's okay. But you know what? It'll probably work its way into future books, and I think that would be
yeah.
incredible. Doing a Deathwalker protagonist, how
Yeah.
amazing! Yeah. Oh, that's so
That
interesting.
could be interesting, right? I might have to do a bit more research.
Yes, I would love to read
Yeah, no,
about that.
but Phyllida is our wise woman in the book. She's a beautiful protagonist because she doesn't feel sorry for herself. She is curious, and people who are curious, they're the people that you want to hang out with because they ask questions and they're interested in you. And then, she's not judgmental. But she's made mistakes, and she's also dealing with the mental health crises that have faced her through her life because of past traumas. And so, I try not to shy away from that, but realizing that, these people who are incredibly wise and warm may well have had these traumas and these crises in their life, but they have faced them. And she is sort of teaching her family, I guess, or her community what it is to walk with your past and how there's a line in the book, which I can't remember because I made it up so long ago, but, after a lot of reading and a lot of kind of this Celtic mythology working its way into my mind, if you learn to walk with your past while the raven flies, you will, if you learn to walk with it, that's where wisdom lies, and to sit with it and to be beside it and to understand that you can't turn away from what you've faced, but you just need to sit with it. And this is her journey about sitting with her past and how she has sometimes not done that, but how she does do that. But really at the heart, this book is a rollicking murder mystery. But we have this sort of interesting spiritual journey of Phyllida on the side. So that's quite fun to do too.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. We've had a few authors on recently that have been talking about or mentioning what we've been calling the stalking idea, where this idea sort of comes into your mind and for a story. And, it sounds like that's what happened with this one. It sort of popped into your mind and you thought about it and then sort of just popped it to the side a little bit, but it didn't leave you. And they were all saying that's how you know that that's sort of the story that you have to write. So is that what happened with you?
I mean, certainly that was my protagonist who came to me just with that one scene. And it was actually the same way that Alfie Baines started too. I had one scene. In Alfie Baines, I had a very strong scene that I'd written years ago that I stumbled on when I was looking for a new book idea, of an older woman who in her 60s on the phone to her sister. And I'd written this scene, so I'd forgotten about it. But she was on the phone to her sister. She was in her farmhouse. She was sort of struggling with life and ideas and loneliness. And she goes to the door of her farmhouse when there's a knock, and at the front door stands a boy. And the scene finished there. I knew nothing about this woman or this boy. I didn't know who the boy was. But when I was sort of thinking maybe I'll write a book to learn who this boy is, that was the whole impetus for that book. And similarly with this one, what was the secret that this elderly woman was looking out the window and thinking about as she pondered death? And that for me has been how those two books started. My current book is really driving me crazy because I don't have one of those scenes to go on. I don't know what the book is. I'm writing every day thinking, oh, this is terrible.
But it's the process though, isn't it? It's the process.
It is. Yeah. And I remember very vividly talking to my publisher, Annette Barlow, at a festival once, 9 months before Bookshop needed to be handed in. And I said, oh, Anna, this book's terrible. And she's like, it is not. Stop it.
It's like all my authors come to me at some point and say that.
It 300 times and it's no longer terrible, and it actually turns out that it's quite good. And you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. How did it go from terrible to good? This is unbelievable. So that is trusting the process, which is one of those little phrases that I never really understood until like last week, when I thought, oh, I've been here so many times before. I hate everything I write.
It sort of doesn't make it easier though, does it? I feel like you still get...
No, it doesn't, although it does make you feel like I can do it. I can do it.
Yeah, like you've got that hindsight. I've done it before, I can do it again, but then you're stuck in it and you still think, no, this is rubbish. I cannot write.
Yeah, but then you still think
yes,
oh my God.
And you trust the process and you just keep going. Yeah, no,
I'll keep going. I mean, I think there's probably something in my brain, but who knows?
It will come out. It will flow, I'm sure of it. But so that's an incredible story about the researching of the death doulas and the death walkers. And I did want to talk to you about researching for books and how traveling is a really good excuse. Is very important for research.
Exactly.
But if you can work in a few, overseas locations, then traveling surely is a great way of going over and seeing for yourself and finding what parts you want to include. And you did this with your book, and I just wanted to ask you a little bit about that, where you traveled, because a lot of it, like you said, was half of it really is overseas.
Almost. Yeah, a little bit less, probably 40% is set in England. And, and equally, the book I'm writing now is partially set in Scotland.
And have you been there?
I'm back from Scotland from my research trip.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that's really because, apart from wanting to explore issues like death and dying and issues like with Alfie Baines, I wanted to explore issues of grandmothering, and I wanted to explore the issues around agency in children. What does it take? What is it when a child has no agency in their life? And what does that look like? And what would that look like if you had a character like Alfie Baines, who is quite extraordinary? And that helps, with those sort of that narrative drive is much easier when you've got an unusual child, right? To look at those issues like agency in childhood and what it feels like to be helpless, to be not in charge of your own destiny. And why is that? Is it that we give children so little agency in their own lives? That was an interesting theme, even though I didn't know I was necessarily exploring that. When I got into the depths of that book, that was what I was exploring. But equally, in these sort of interesting themes that you get to play with as an author, because you're just lucky, right? I equally just want to go back to being in the famous five and drinking lemonade and lying in the head, having an adventure where there's a cave and a pirate and a smuggler. Equally, I just want to do that. In Bookshop of Buried Pasts, I thought, well, I need a bit of that, right? I need like a mystery, and there's got to be some heather and ginger beer or whatever. So maybe not. There was probably red wine, but... So I went to England and I thought I need to find a manor house, because at the heart of Bookshop of Buried Pasts is a manor house in the English countryside. And I needed to find this place because I really do write from life. So I need to know what I'm writing because I've seen it. So I wanted to take a real manor house and use that. And so I traveled around the UK and all around the UK, and I've ended up finding one in Richmond called Ham House, a beautiful old manor house from the 1500s or whatever. And so that was really fun. So going on a trip and, claiming my expenses for a little bit of tax relief was fun. And also just going around to all these places and seeing these incredible English walled gardens and beautiful old houses that have so much history in the secret passages and the beautiful old paintings on the walls and all of these things. So that stuff was fun. And in the book, there is a scene set in the real village in Devon of Clovelly, which is an incredibly gorgeous fishing village. And if you've ever been to Clovelly, you won't forget it. It's this tiny village of, I don't know, maybe 100 houses, maybe more, but it's set on the side of a very steep hill with all these cobbled paths between them. There are no cars allowed into the village. And so until extremely recently, donkeys pulled people's groceries up the hill or down the hill by sled. So there would be one place, a tiny little spot for a car or a truck at the bottom of the hill, and then you would get your donkey to bring your groceries up on a sled. And this was going on for a long, long time, till very recently. And so in the book, when I'm back in our 60s timeline, because there is a 1960s and a 1970s timeline in here, we go to Clovelly and we have that little experience, which was super fun. And Clovelly now is spectacular to visit. There's a pub at the bottom of the hill called the Red Lion, and that's the only place in the village where you're allowed to bring a car because it's right at the bottom of the hill on this curved bay where all of these spectacular fishing boats sit. And there's a pub that comes out into the ocean on this sort of stone, built stone harbour. And around the bay, all these tiny little cottages are built overlooking the pub, the Red Lion. And there's only a few rooms at the Red Lion. It's really hard to get a room if you don't book ahead. And so I managed to get one night at the Red Lion. So we drove in, and because there are no parking spaces, the only people who come to the pub in the summer when I was there, in this spectacular place that has been used in films because it is so filmic, the only people that come are the tourists who have happened to have one of the 15 rooms at the pub or whatever, or 20 rooms at the pub, and the locals. So this is a local pub, and every summer and every Friday night and Saturday night during summer, they have a band playing on this incredible harbour for the locals and those lucky tourists, which happened to be about 7 people, my husband and me. And it was the most moving, gorgeous place. And it's owned by the fellow at the top who has a manor house right at the top of the hill. He owns every house in that village. He doesn't let second homers rent from him. They have to be contributing members of the village. Village was once owned by the Queen in the 1200s, and she's on-sold it to these very wealthy families who've held it through the generations. It's the most unusual place, and it's incredibly beautiful. And you can only walk up these very steep cobbled paths through these tiny stone houses. And you talk to the locals and they think it's the most wonderful place to live. So there was a little bit of ginger beer and heather research for you. That was fun. I put it in the book.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Well, you need the balance, right, between murder mystery and just lying in the fields and the
And all
meadows.
of the other things.
Yeah. But also travel, you could be going there to research a particular thing. You've got a little bit of an idea about it, but you just don't know what you're going to stumble across and how it's going to work its way into your books. And places like that, I feel like it only happens when you're traveling far away and where you sit back and you just go, where are we? What is happening? This is otherworldly, and it just creates this magical experience that you'll remember forever, and it could be made into your book.
Yeah, no, that's right. You can put these in your book. So yeah, I just got back from Scotland and I decided I pitched it, my next book. I pitched this woman who owns she's married to the Scottish laird, and they have this crises happen. And anyway, I thought, I need to go and work out how this Scottish landholding system works, because it's quite a topical at the moment, the land holdings in Scotland, there's a lot of push to change the regulations because these old families in Scotland have owned so much of the land forever. And so I went across to Scotland, and through a friend of a friend, I met, the laird of one of these huge estates, and went to dinner and, had these amazing experiences where he took me out to this little island in the middle of the loch that his family had begun on in the 1200s when Robert the Bruce first gave them the title of this 7,000 acres. And he took me out to this Crannog, which is this tiny little island covered in reeds, and the ruins of the original house were. And, I got these incredible experiences because when you're writing a book, people are so interested to help you. And so you find yourself in these incredible situations. So, yeah, I've got those lovely stories for my next book. I just have to work out what the story is, which is what I'm wrangling with at the moment.
I'm sure it'll come to you. But yeah, all that history, especially when you travel to those countries overseas, just so much history, isn't it, that unfolds. And just, different landscapes even is just
so interesting. And if you're interested, I'm a little bit interested in witchcraft in terms of, I didn't really put it in the Bookshop of Buried Pasts, but I put a little bit of my vague interest in Celtic mythology through it. But it's only a tiny thread, right? But you get to play with stuff, and you can if you want to. And in the final pages of the Bookshop of Buried Pasts, we fly to Lerwick in Scotland, in Shetland, and in Scotland, and a tiny island of Shetland, which is famous because of Anne Cleeve's possibly, or all of those books. And I put into that book, one of my other protagonists had been quite influenced by her family history. So there's a thread about somebody looking for their family history in this book, and she does a DNA test, and she discovers that her 4 times great grandfather was a real man called Samuel Tulloch, who was a ship's captain who sailed his ship, the Northmavine, from Shetland in Scotland to Launceston in Tasmania. And because I'm originally Tasmanian, that interests me. And then so I gave my protagonist this man as her 4 times great grandfather, and his name was Samuel Tulloch. And a few generations before Samuel Tulloch was born in Shetland, the last woman to be burned as a witch in Shetland was a woman called Barbara Tulloch. So they shared a surname. So I figured they were probably quite, there was probably a big chance on a tiny island with a tiny population that they were somehow related. Anyway, but Samuel Tulloch is actually my 4 times great grandfather, right? So I figure I'd really like to have some connection to the last beautiful herbalist woman and her daughter Helen, who were burned as witches, because I feel I want to tell their story. And so I just mention them because, that's a bit of fun too. And it's interesting. I really want to bring it, because in the story we have a herbalist. Phyllida Banks is a herbalist as well as a book dealer, and her grandmother was a herbalist. And so I bring all these little threads in because it's interesting to me, and I'm interested in what history does through the generations. And anyway,
it gives you a chance to play with it, doesn't it, and explore it. And you clearly have some connection there that you probably didn't even realize. But
exactly, who knows? But Samuel Tulloch was an interesting find for me in the family history, and I thought, oh well, that goes back to Shetland, and I really feel drawn to explore that area of the world. I've been there a few times, and I really find it interesting. And why not bring those little threads into a book?
Absolutely. Well, it's your book. You can do whatever you want.
It's like there aren't that many rules, right? It's a bit worrying.
No, well, you can. That's the the beauty of it, isn't it? It's fiction, and you can write about whatever you want and make it yours. I mean, you have to enjoy writing it, right? And it's got to be authentic to you, which it is if you include all those bits and pieces that you're interested in.
Yeah.
Okay, Sarah. So when you're not traveling the world and doing your research, can you tell us about a normal day in the life of Sarah Clutton? Is there a normal day in the life? How does it work for you to get it all done?
I'm not very good at doing, any kind of normal day because I'm just so scatterbrained. And so I would normally get up and sit down and make a coffee and then try and write, and often just stare at the screen and look at my Instagram instead.
Mhm.
So I need to work that out. But
Get rid of the Instagram. It's hard though, isn't it?
I know I need to do that. But no, I do a little bit of other sort of copywriting, although that's really dried up since AI a lot.
Oh, has it? Yeah, I bet.
And I'm sort of interested, and I do a tiny little bit of work with social impact for our company that we have, but I don't have a normal writing day. It's just sit down and try and do a few sessions of writing. And if I'm lucky, I might get some words written. But often, like, for example, my book that's due in January in terms of a draft is due in January. And then I guess we'll hopefully get a few structural edits going on. I've had that book since September. I've had I was lucky to get a contract for another 2 books. And I've had that idea that I pitched in September with no real idea about what it was going to be, but it was in Scotland. And then there's a Tasmanian element in a house and all of this stuff. And for many months, I didn't write any words exactly. I just threw ideas around with my sister, who, as I said, has good ideas. And I wrote synopses, and then I thought that's terrible and that's ridiculous and that's stupid. And then after a month of working on one synopsis, I'd change it, and then I'd have all these characters that no longer worked as that in that way. Maybe I'd change them. They'd work that way, and I write another synopsis. They might be 10,000 word synopses or something, just
wow. Yeah.
or 5,000 words or something, just
Yeah.
rubbishy sort of ideas that I put into some sort of form. And then I throw that one out, and then I start again. And then I thought, oh God, I've got to start writing this book. So in about March, I started writing some words, and I had about 15,000 words by the time I went to Scotland in mid-April. And, at that stage, you've got 8 months left to write the book, and you're going to do your research. And then I got back from Scotland, and I threw those 15,000 words out, and I wrote a new synopsis. And then I've started writing that book. They're all kind of vaguely related. I've got this one character, and I've got this one setting, and I've got this one opening scene, but how is that going to work with all the other characters? And these 2 settings in Tasmania and in Scotland, how are they going to work together? And really, that's ridiculous what you've come up with, Sarah. That doesn't work. Anyway, so now I'm about, I don't even know how much I'm in, maybe another 15,000 or 20,000 words in. And that's going badly, but I am
So is this another synopsis, or you've just started writing?
No, these are the words of this latest synopsis. And I think I'll just keep going with it, because it comes to a point where you just have to go, stop it.
Yeah.
Keep writing this. It's probably terrible, but when you get to the end of a whole first draft, you're going to rewrite the whole thing anyway, and it'll be something else. Yeah. I'm
you could come up with a synopsis that you think is great and works perfectly, and then you can start writing it, and then it all just changes direction, and you have no control over that. So it is hard, isn't it? It's trying to find that balance between the 2.
Yeah, and you've got to be prepared, I think, as a writer, to sit in the discomfort of your own company, which is boring, because I bore myself a lot, and I think, oh, this is boring. I don't have any colleagues. So that's boring as a writer, because I mean, I don't mind being alone in my head, but it can be tedious, and you do need to get out there. And so I do go for a walk and look at all the interesting people. So I'm in Melbourne for a few months at the moment, so in the inner city, and so I get to kind of look at all the interesting people who don't usually hang out in the village where I live in the Southern Highlands, and that is giving me a little bit of impetus for my 2030 book, which sounds a long way away, but I've got some
like a really long way away.
I know, but like it will come, because then when I hand this in January, I'm meant to be starting that one, and I'm thinking that's why I'm on this gap year in Melbourne, to get some ideas for that book. You got to just be prepared to remember that you hate sitting with your stupid head, and then you've just got to do it anyway. That's kind of the trick, I think.
Yeah, and I think that is the same for all jobs. There are things that you love about them, but there's things that you don't like doing about them. Every job has its fun things.
Yeah,
Like
that's
when
right.
when the words flow, that's great. But then the actual work of making them sound half decent and
I
making
know.
sure that all the loose ends are tied up can get quite hard, can't it?
It can, but that's as you say, it's just a job, and it's a fun job, and it doesn't pay very well, but we just do it anyway.
Yeah, because we can't. Hey. Well, yeah, speaking of that, and we are very lucky to have that job, a lot of our listeners are emerging authors or aspiring authors looking to be published. What are your top tips now that you've been on this publishing journey for a little while now? What are your top tips for aspiring authors or people that are wanting to get published?
Mm. Well, I've done lots of courses, which helps you to, if you're like me and you sort of get overwhelmed by all the possibilities, and you also don't know what you don't know until you've done a bit of work on craft, I guess. So, I think it does help to do a course if you are coming at it from a background where you haven't studied how to write. So I've done lots of writing courses, novel writing courses, and so on, and other writing courses. I think that's very, very helpful because it also helps you to get comfortable in the idea that someone can critique your work unless you get very good at letting people critique your work and become very open to that, and then you're not probably going to improve as quickly as you might. And also, when you start working with your publisher, which you will if you keep going for long enough, then it's going to be a much more enjoyable experience for both of you if you are very open to critique. So, yeah, I think to a course.
And I think publishers appreciate when you're open to critique too, because
Yeah.
it is part of the process and it does have to happen. And yes, if you can go through the process beforehand so that you know how to take on board comments and feedback, then I think that's they would appreciate that a lot.
Exactly. So that's a good tip. And the other thing is, well, I mean, I didn't really start writing novels until I was in my mid to late 40s because I thought I could never do it because I have that sort of brain that is scrambled and doesn't remember things, like literally doesn't remember things at all. And also a little bit of, even facial blindness. I have a bit of that going on. I can't remember things, and I find it very difficult to hold on to a thread of anything. And so when you ask me what a novel was about, or if I've read it, I probably won't remember reading it. And if I do remember reading it, I won't remember what it was about. I might remember the feeling of it, or if I thought it was good, but I won't remember the story, and I won't remember any detail that happened in it probably. And so I don't say that lightly. It's really true. I have a terrible memory. And so I thought when I started writing that I would start with picture books because I could remember 400 words. I could remember that arc. And that wasn't so hard for someone like me who doesn't hold on to information very easily. I thought, well, there's no way I could write a novel because I just finished a novel yesterday and I can't tell you what was in that novel really. I can't remember how that they got from there to there. How could I possibly write a novel? So anyway, I failed dismally at picture books, then I failed at middle grade, then I failed at anything to do with shorter things, which I thought I might be able to do because of my memory and my brain. I failed at all of those dismally, and I spent many years trying and failing to get those published. And so eventually I was left with only the novel that I hadn't tackled. And I thought, well, Sarah, if you want to be a writer and you think that's your best skill in life, which, I was good at writing things. I was a lawyer and I could write sentences that were nice, although you had to unlearn being a lawyer to be a novelist, to be frank. You have to unlearn all the things you learn.
I can imagine.
But I thought, then I'm going to have to work out how to write a novel. And, there's got to be people like me who've done this before. There's got to be ways to do it. So then at the age of, I don't know, 46 or something, I thought I'll just start writing a novel. There's got to be ways that I can write it down that I remember what I've written, and there's got to be ways forward. And so I started writing it, and I got 40,000 words in, and then realized I had absolutely no clue what I was doing. I didn't know anything about structure. I didn't know anything about what you had to put in a novel. I didn't know about turning points, or I didn't know about anything. So then I did then I got an email from the Australian Writers' Centre, I think at that moment, that I'd had this revelation that I was useless and couldn't do it. And I signed up. And then I had a novel written at the end of another 6 months. So that was wild.
What course was that?
That was the write your novel. Write your novel. Yeah.
So, and it like did what it says on the packet, right? Like you wrote your novel.
I wrote my novel. What about that desperate moment in my midlife where I thought, what is my life about? What on earth have I achieved? Because I'd come to the end of my sort of heavy duty mothering years, where my children were not needing me as much. I mean, obviously they did need me a lot, but that physical amount of supervision you need to do is at an end. And I thought, Sarah, it's like do or die. You've got to do it. And so I did it. It was crazy. And then I managed to get my first novel published with Bookshop, and that was a 2-book deal. So then I had to quickly write another one in 6 months. Oh my God. But I did that too. And it's amazing what you can do if you learn the tools and you learn to trust the process, and you learn to say to yourself, just because you can't do it, haven't done it, and you don't think you can do it, doesn't mean you can't do it. You probably can do it. Just, learn how to do it. So it was like that growth mindset my teachers were telling my kids at school, can't do it yet, but you'll be able to in the future if you learn.
At any age, right? It doesn't matter.
Any age. And then I really wanted to get a traditional deal after that. And so then I worked and did another course and did this and did that. And eventually I got there.
Yay. Well, you certainly did. And congratulations. The Bookshop of Buried Pasts, congratulations on it being launched. It's very exciting. And
really exciting.
It's clearly all worked very well for you. Can't tell that you can't remember things at all.
No, well, I didn't remember that you and I hadn't actually quite sorted out our link this morning, so that was a momentary panic.
But see, we get there in the end. It's totally okay.
Thanks for having me, and hopefully I'm looking forward to listening to more of your amazing podcasts.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for coming on. It was so great to chat to you. Bye, Sarah.
Okay, bye, Tina. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Book Deal podcast. If you are enjoying the pod, we'd really appreciate you following or sharing the show in your podcast directory, checking us out on Instagram and Facebook, or supporting us through our Patreon community at patreon.com/the Book Deal podcast.